Pauline Akello Onunga Adero. I am an African woman who is working towards building a peaceful continent, and I have done this through working with several organizations, including IGAD, the African Union, and now the United Nations. My passion for all these things started with working with the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. I worked on human rights education. This gave me amazing exposure and great experience. As a lawyer, you know, sometimes people are confined to thinking of working only going to courtrooms. Get a lot of experience and exposure. And we did this through going around from county to county, um, teaching teaching government officials, the judiciary, on the human rights based approach. You don't have to be a lawyer sitting in an office and going to court, but actually making a difference on the ground. Mm-hmm. And this is how my story began. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then from there you worked with the Kenya Magistrates and Judges Association?
Yes, then I worked with the Kenya Magistrates and Judges Association. We continued with judicial education for the judges and magistrates for a couple of years, and it was mainly focused on the human rights issues and refugee issues as well.
But it was your studies at the University of Bradford that
Yes.
grounded you in issues of peace building and conflict?
Yes, I at some point I decided that I needed to hone my skills, not just have the experience on the ground. And I chose to go to the University of Bradford and do a master's on African peace and conflict studies. And then from there, I propelled to working on conflict matters in the continent. I've been involved in a couple of peace processes, and it's not true. Women are involved in peace processes, but a lot of times we have men who are at the forefront, men with a certain stature and carry certain clout. So you find that most of the women who are working with these men are not in the limelight, and I can say I have been one of them. I have worked in the IGAD Somali peace process that took place here in Kenya from 2002 all the way to 2005. And we were working with Ambassador Kiplagat, who was the lead, but we were several women who were supporting this process, and I was one of them. And a lot of our work included supporting what we called the committees that they had, and I was working in the committee that was drafting the transitional charter for the Somali federal government. So yes, I was involved very intricately in this process, but yes, of course, when it comes to the recognition, a lot of the people working behind the scenes will not be recognized. I am a lawyer by training, and a lot of what I contributed was how to put in the legal framework for this transitional federal constitution. So yes, I did bring in my expertise and my background into this process. And the other peace process I worked on was between Sudan and South Sudan. I worked with the African Union High-Level Implementation Panel, which was chaired by former President Becky of South Africa. And I was part of the legal team. In fact, I was appointed as a Justice and Reconciliation Officer, which was, and primarily my work was to deal with the AU proposal that they had on Darfur initially, but the mandate of the panel was extended and expanded. So we started working on the mediation between Sudan and South Sudan before the referendum. and after the referendum into the independence of South Sudan. And all along, we were working with a team of very brilliant people, and it included brilliant women as well. And I was honored to be in their presence. And they put together bilateral agreements for Sudan and South Sudan, which are still in operation today, what they call the cooperation agreements, which then manages the relationship between these two countries after the independence. I was part of the drafting team, which dealt with the border issues, the nationality issues between the two countries, the oil issues between the two countries. So yeah, this is also another process that I was very closely involved in for the last 7 years. The what's interesting about the two Sudans is that they had problems, internal problems.
You were based in Khartoum.
I was based in Khartoum in Sudan. So part of our work was to do a lot of mediation between the government and the parties to the conflict in Sudan. So this included working on cessation of hostilities agreements with the rebel movements in Darfur and the rebel movements in what they call the two areas, Blue Nile and Southern Kordofan in Sudan. I have also been part of the work that we're doing with South Sudan before the conflict started. So we were working with the SPLM parties and the government parties and the opposition parties, as well as civil society. Well, initially when we started, there were a lot of women who were part of the team. But as time started to go past, many of the women started to search for other opportunities. I stayed for 7 years, and I was the last woman in the group. And so for a very long while, I was alone working with this team. So I was working with President Thabo Mbeki, who is the chair of the panel, and President Abu Bakr, who also was a member of the panel. Later on, they started to involve other people, very high caliber people. We had the Minister of Algeria as well, working with the panel, and a number of people from the region as well.
But no women.
But no women. No, there were no women at that level. We found that it was very difficult to have women, especially from Sudan. South Sudan had a couple of women who would come for the peace and for the peace processes, but when it came to Sudan, there were not very many women, and we started working with a group of Sudanese women called the Sudan Women's Task Force, and they had started lobbying for more presence of women in the mediation processes, in the negotiations, consultations, and they succeeded. And I would constantly be in touch with them and advise them, and also speak on their behalf sometimes, and talk to my male colleagues, including the chair of the panel, to include more women in the mediation process. And they started to do it. We started seeing it. And it wasn't that there were lack of qualified women. I think it was just women who were in certain positions were not sent for these things. But then eventually we started seeing more and more women coming in. Well, women in general are already facing so many challenges, and we need to create our space. We need to support each other. And as a person, I found it very difficult sometimes to work in an all-male environment. But then I also realized that it was an opportunity for women to be represented in this all-male environment. And many young women find it very difficult to work in such an environment. But I would urge them to continue to try and find their space, because If you do not find your space, if you do not speak out, then the whole place, you will find that women's voices are not being heard, women's positions are not being taken because nobody is speaking out. So I would advise young women to continue. Do not be intimidated by the environment, but continue to work as much as you can, as hard as you can. And we have to work twice as hard as men because things do not come easier for us. And this is what I've had to do for very many years. Uh, and I'm still trying to find more and more space for myself. So it should be a continuous struggle to do this. My advice to young women is to just be courageous and to step up to the position. This is what I've had to do on several occasions. There are times you have to make your space and take charge and just be bold and positive about the work you're doing and confident. I just hope that I can be a positive influence and keep doing what I'm doing in peacekeeping, keep mediation processes, and I'm now trying to do this through the UN, working with the UN. I would advise young women to invest time, invest their energy, and education, of course. And this would be my advice to them. I think the future in women's mediation is it's growing and it's going to be very bright. And I think that we need to have more and more women stepping up to the plate and taking more responsibilities, because at the end of the day, we have in these conflicts, the people who bear the brunt are the women and children. So we need to also have a position to state what our concerns are, our challenges are, and we need to be given opportunities. And I do think that right now women are pushing more and more, and we should keep pushing. We should not stop.